I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold and read the text one more time. This year we're keeping it small. Close family only. You understand? Close family. I'd been sending money home for 6 years. I'd paid for my sister's car. I'd covered 3 months of my parents' mortgage when my dad got laid off. I'd flown back every Thanksgiving even when I could barely afford the ticket. Back when I actually couldn't afford it. And now, 3 weeks before Christmas, my mother was telling me the gathering I'd always just assumed I was part of. I wasn't part of it. I set the phone face down on the table. I didn't throw anything. I didn't text back something I'd regret. I just sat there, in my apartment in Austin, watching the ceiling fan turn, and I thought about something my college roommate once told me. She said the best revenge isn't anger, it's distance. And then it's letting them see exactly what that distance looks like. I had learned over the years to keep certain things quiet. I'm not flashy by nature. I drive a used car. I wear the same rotation of plain clothes I've had since grad school. When I visit home, I don't talk about work much because it always turns into something uncomfortable. My dad asking if I can spare a little extra. My sister making a comment about how I think I'm better than everyone. So I stopped offering details. They stopped asking. And somewhere along the way, they formed a picture of me in their minds. The one who left, the one who was doing okay, nothing special. They had no idea I'd sold my company 8 months earlier. Not a startup in the romantic sense, no venture capital, no ping pong tables. I'd spent 4 years building a healthcare data analytics platform out of my second bedroom. It was unglamorous, difficult, often lonely work. I lost 2 long-term relationships over the stress of it. I missed weddings, I missed funerals. I watched my savings disappear and come back and disappear again. But 18 months ago, a regional hospital network made an offer, and after 6 months of negotiation, I walked away with $2.1 million after taxes. I did not tell my family. I'd intended to. I'd rehearsed it, actually. A quiet dinner, showing them the paperwork, letting them be proud. But 2 days before I'd planned to do it, my sister called to tell me she'd heard I was doing well and wanted to know if I could co-sign on a condo she was buying with her boyfriend. When I said I needed to think about it, she told my mother I was selfish and cold. My mother texted me the same night and said she was disappointed in me, so I didn't tell them. I bought a small lake house in the hill country instead. 40 minutes outside Austin, on the water, 3 bedrooms, a big wraparound porch with a wood-burning fireplace. Nothing ostentatious. Just mine. I'd been fixing it up slowly for the past several months. My neighbors were a retired couple named the Holloways, who brought over smoked brisket the week I moved in, and never asked me for anything. The lake house didn't have a name. It didn't need one. What it had was space for 12 people to sleep comfortably, a kitchen I'd renovated myself, and a dock where you could sit with a glass of wine and watch the herons come in low over the water at dusk. It had a stone patio with string lights and a fire pit. It had the kind of quiet that makes people exhale when they first step out of their cars, like they've been holding their breath for months. I started making calls that same afternoon. The first person I called was my friend Renata. We'd met in grad school, lost touch, found each other again during the pandemic. Her family had cut her off years ago. Her parents disapproved of her wife, and they'd simply stopped including her in things. She spent most holidays alone or with her wife's small family in Portland. I asked her if she wanted to come to the lake for Christmas. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Are you serious?" And I said yes. Then I called my cousin Willa. Willa was technically on my dad's side, but she'd always been more mine than theirs. She'd been quietly excluded from the close family Christmas for reasons that had never been fully explained, but had something to do with the fact that she'd gotten divorced and remarried, and my aunt didn't approve. Willa had 3 kids. Her youngest was 6. I asked if they wanted to come to the lake. She said, "I haven't had a real Christmas in 4 years." I said, "You're coming." I called my old coworker Bethany, who was spending Christmas alone for the first time after her divorce was finalized. I called my friend Devin and his partner. I called Renata's wife's brother, who Devin knew and who had nowhere to be. I called my grad school professor, Dr. Owens, a 70-year-old woman who'd mentored me through the worst years of building the company and who spent every holiday alone since her husband passed. She said she'd bring pie. Within 48 hours, I had 11 confirmed guests. I started booking caterers. I ordered a live Christmas tree, a real one, 7 feet, Douglas fir, and had it delivered and set up in the corner of the living room. I ordered cases of wine and sparkling cider. I bought gifts for the kids. I arranged kayak rentals for Christmas Eve morning, a guided nature walk around the lake, and a bonfire with s'mores for Christmas night. I put together a menu: smoked brisket, roasted vegetables, twice-baked potatoes, Dr. Part, Owens's pie, and a chocolate cake from a bakery in Fredericksburg that I'd been wanting an excuse to order from for months. I didn't post any of it publicly. I wasn't doing this for an audience. I was doing it because a text had arrived that said close family only, and I had decided to build my own family and spend Christmas with them instead. What I did do on Christmas Eve around 5 in the afternoon was let Renata post a few photos to her Instagram. Renata has a good eye. She used to do event photography before she switched careers, and the light on the lake that afternoon was extraordinary, golden and low, catching the water in long ribbons. She took one of the whole group on the dock, wine glasses raised, Willa's kids in matching pajamas, Dr. Owens in the middle holding a mug of hot cider and laughing at something Devin had said. She took one of the fire pit and one of the tree inside, glowing in the dark living room with the dark water visible through the window behind it. She tagged me in 3 of them. She tagged my cousin Willa, who had, at some point in the past, been followed by my aunt who was present at my parents' Christmas that night. My aunt, who I can only assume turned her phone around and showed the screen to my mother. I was standing on the porch with a glass of wine at 8:37 p.m. when my phone buzzed. I looked down. My sister. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. My mother. I let that go too. Then my dad. I turned the phone over in my hand for a moment, looking at the water, at the reflection of the string lights moving gently on the surface. Then I set the phone on the porch railing, screen down, and went inside to sit with my people. Dr. Term. Owens was teaching Willa's oldest how to play gin rummy. Devin and his partner were washing dishes together, laughing about something. Renata's wife was reading to the youngest two in the big armchair by the tree. The fire was going. The house smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke, and the last of the brisket. I stood in the doorway for a minute and just looked at all of it. 22 missed calls by the time I checked the phone before bed. I read the texts in order. My sister first. Where are you? Mom said you weren't coming, but I didn't think you'd do something like this. That's Willa. Why is Willa there? What are you trying to prove? Then, call me back. Then, are you seriously ignoring us? Then, are you seriously ignoring us? Then, I cannot believe you would do this to this family on Christmas Eve. This is so typical of you. My mother, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, but this is hurtful and immature. Call me. Then, 2 hours later, I hope you're happy. My dad had called 6 times and not left a single voicemail. That was, somehow, the most clarifying thing of all. He had nothing to say. He just wanted me to pick up so he could control the conversation. I plugged in my phone, turned off the light, and slept better than I had in months. Christmas morning, I woke up to 31 missed calls. The texts had continued overnight. My mother asking where I'd gotten money for all of this. My sister saying things I won't repeat here, including something about how I'd always had to make everything about myself. There was a long message from my aunt, the one who'd seen Renata's photos, explaining that she was confused and hurt and that family was supposed to stick together. There was a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years asking if everything was okay. And then, at 11:43 p.m., a text from my dad that I read 3 times. I know you have money now. I don't know how much or where it came from, but I know you have it. You owe this family. After everything we did for you, you owe us. Call me. I set the phone down on the nightstand. I thought about the summer I was 17, when my dad had lost his job and the house was close to foreclosure, and my mother had sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that if I didn't give them the $4,200 I'd saved from 2 years of working at the grocery store, they were going to lose the house. I'd handed over my savings. I hadn't been asked. I'd been told. And then my dad had looked at me and said, "Well, that's what family does." I thought about the year I was 23 and skipped a trip I'd been planning for 8 months because my sister called in a panic about needing money for a security deposit, and I wired it to her within the hour and she didn't pay me back. And when I mentioned it 8 months later, she said she didn't remember agreeing to pay it back. I thought about every Christmas I'd driven to that house with gifts and food and a willingness to sit through dinners where my dad talked over everyone and my mother managed his moods and my sister looked at everything I owned and calculated what it was worth and whether she could get any of it. "You owe us." I got up. I showered. I went downstairs and made coffee and stood on the porch in the cold morning air and watched the herons come in over the water, exactly like I'd imagined they would. Willa's kids were the first ones awake. The 6-year-old came padding downstairs in her Christmas socks and stopped dead when she saw the tree and the presents underneath it, and made a sound that I can only describe as pure, undiluted joy. Within 20 minutes, the whole house was awake, and we were in our pajamas opening gifts and Dr. Tour. Owens was telling a story about a Christmas in 1987 that had everyone crying laughing, and Renata was taking photos again, and Devin burned the first batch of pancakes and made a second batch, and they were perfect. I didn't check my phone until noon. 41 missed calls. My sister had sent 17 text messages. The last one, sent at 10:22 a.m. on Christmas morning, said, "I'm telling everyone what you did." I thought about that for a moment. Then I thought about what, exactly, she would tell them. That I'd had Christmas at my own home with my own friends and didn't invite the people who told me I wasn't part of the family this year. That I'd taken photos that were visible on Instagram, that my cousin Willa had been there. I thought about what everyone even meant to her. Her boyfriend's family, who I'd met twice, the neighbors, a Facebook group. I typed back one sentence. "That sounds fine. Merry Christmas." She didn't respond. The rest of Christmas was exactly what I'd wanted it to be. We kayaked in the afternoon, cold and brilliant, the water so clear you could see the bottom. Dr. Owens sat on the dock and watched and cheered. Willa's kids caught a small bass and threw it back and talked about it for the rest of the day like it was a trophy. We did the bonfire at night and the s'mores, and someone brought out a Bluetooth speaker and there was dancing on the patio. Devin's partner, who has a genuinely beautiful voice, sang something quiet and slow while the fire burned down. I stood at the edge of the patio and looked at all of these people and thought, I built this. I built this. The week after Christmas, I got a call from my dad. I let it ring twice, then picked up. He got straight to the point. He wanted to know about the money. How much had I made? Where'd it come from? He used the phrase, "what's fair," twice in the first minute. He said that parents invest in their children and expect a return on that investment. He said, and I remember this exactly because I wrote it down afterward, "Everything you have because of this family." I waited until he was finished. I said, "I saved $4,200 when I was 17. You took it. I never asked for it back. I sent money home 6 times in the last 4 years. I paid for Cassidy's car. Cassidy is my sister. I have records of all of it. I'm not asking for any of it back. But I also don't owe you anything beyond that, and I need you to understand that." He said that was a very cold way of looking at family. I said I agreed that it was cold and that I wished it felt different. He hung up. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my sister's boyfriend's mother, a woman I had met exactly once, at a birthday party 2 years ago. She explained carefully and with what seemed like genuine embarrassment that my sister had told her I was estranged from the whole family and was going through something, and she wanted to check in. I thanked her for calling. I told her I was doing well. I told her I'd had a wonderful Christmas and hoped she had too. She seemed relieved. She apologized for bothering me. I thought about that call for a long time afterward. Not with anger exactly. With something more like clarity. I could see, very plainly, what my sister was doing, constructing a version of events in which I was the unstable one, the difficult one, the one who had gone off the rails with money. And I understood why. The alternative was to look at what had actually happened, that she had been part of a group that had told me I wasn't wanted. And I had responded by showing, quietly and without drama, exactly who I was and exactly what my life looked like. I don't know what I expected from my family after that, not an apology. I've stopped expecting those. Maybe a cooling off period, and then the gradual return to normal, the way things always used to go. The incident would become a story they told about me, lightly mocking, remember when she threw her little Christmas party to prove a point? And I would go along with it because going along with it was easier than the alternative. But something had shifted. I could feel it in myself, even if I couldn't name it exactly. About 6 weeks later, I got a piece of forwarded mail that had been sent to my old apartment address. It was a notice from a creditor regarding a lien on my parents' house. I'd known vaguely that they'd refinanced a few years ago. I hadn't known the details, but this letter made the details fairly clear. They were behind on payments, there was a second lien from a private lender, and the situation was not good. I called a lawyer I knew, someone I'd worked with during the company sale, and asked a few questions. I spent 2 days thinking about it. What I did not do was wire money. I did not call my dad with an offer. I did not let my mother's 3 voicemails go unreturned for the same reason I'd let them go unreturned at Christmas. Not out of cruelty, but out of a very clear-eyed recognition that what they wanted was not a relationship with me, but access to what I had, and that those two things were not the same. What I did do was call Willa. I told her about the lien situation. I told her I was thinking about buying out the second lien myself, not to give to my parents, not to forgive, but to hold. To have the option of what happened next. Willa was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're sure?" And I said I was. The private lender was willing to sell. It took 3 weeks to finalize. My parents didn't know I'd done it. As far as they were concerned, they still owed money to a creditor whose name they recognized. I didn't send a letter. I didn't call and announce it. I filed the paperwork, confirmed the transfer, and then I called my lawyer and asked what my options were. He walked me through them. I thought about my 17-year-old self at that kitchen table, handing over $4,200 because the word family had been turned into a threat. I thought about what my dad had said on the phone. "You owe us. Everything you have because of this family." I sent one letter. Certified mail, return receipt. It was not written in anger. I'd had my lawyer review it before I sent it. It laid out the situation plainly. I had acquired the second lien on the property. I was not calling the note immediately. I was offering a structured arrangement. They could remain in the house, make regular payments at a reduced rate, and I would not exercise any collection rights as long as they were current. There was a second page. The second page said, in plain language, that this arrangement was contingent on something simple, that all contact attempts stop. No calls to my phone. No messages through other family members. No campaigns to my sister's boyfriend's mother or anyone else. If they wanted to continue as though I didn't exist, that was fine with me. The arrangement would hold. If they wanted a relationship with me, a real one, that was also something I was open to. But it would have to be built from scratch, on different terms, and it would have to start with honesty about what the last few years had looked like. I sent it on a Thursday. The return receipt came back signed on a Saturday. I don't know what they said to each other when they read it. I wasn't there. I don't have anyone in that house reporting back to me. What I know is that the calls stopped. My sister sent one last text. "This is insane, you know that, right? This is not normal." And then she stopped too. Willa called me the day I told her it was done. She asked how I felt. I was standing on the dock, same spot I'd stood on Christmas Eve with my wine glass, watching the same stretch of water. The herons were out. The light was coming across low and sideways, the way it does in January when the sun doesn't get very high. It was cold. I had on a wool coat I'd bought myself with the first significant money I'd ever made. Back when the company started generating real revenue. Back when I let myself believe for the first time that it was going to work. I thought about how to answer Willa's question. I said quiet. She said she understood. I stood there a little longer after we hung up. The herons moved slowly, like they had nowhere to be. The water was perfectly still. I built this too, I thought. This quiet, this stillness. I didn't build it out of anger. I built it out of the simple and long overdue recognition that I was allowed to decide what my life looked like, who was in it, and on what terms. That recognition was not a gift anyone gave me. Nobody sat me down and granted me permission. I just woke up one morning and understood, finally, that I had been waiting for permission that was never going to come. So I stopped waiting. I went inside. I made coffee. I sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, in my house, on my lake, and I opened my laptop and started working on the next thing. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that Christmas. Not the phone calls, not the certified letter, not even the moment I found out about the lien. I mean what happened underneath all of it, the sequence of causes that led, quietly and without any drama I'd planned, to the life I'm living now. Here's what I keep coming back to. The people who treated me like I owed them something were the same people who had never once asked what I was building. My dad never asked about the company. My mother never asked why I was working 18-hour days for 4 years. My sister knew I sent money home and interpreted it as evidence that I had plenty to spare, not as evidence that I was choosing them over myself, repeatedly, at real cost. They formed a fixed idea of who I was, the one who left, the one who was doing okay, and they never updated it. Not because they were unintelligent, but because updating it would have required them to see me as a person rather than a resource. That's not cruelty exactly. It's a kind of moral laziness. And I say that without bitterness because I think I was guilty of it too for a long time. A laziness about seeing my own situation clearly, about naming what was actually happening instead of softening it into something more comfortable. I kept calling it complicated family stuff. It wasn't complicated, it was straightforward. They took what I gave and asked for more and offered very little in return, and I let it continue because confronting it felt harder than absorbing it. What changed eventually was not a single moment. It was accumulated clarity. The text about close family only wasn't what broke something open. It was what made the opening visible. I had already done the work. The years of building the company, the discipline of not spending what I earned just because I could, the decision to buy the lake house quietly and make something real for myself without waiting for anyone's approval, all of that was the work. The Christmas was just when the work became visible. Renata told me once, during that week at the lake, that she'd spent years trying to earn her family's acceptance by shrinking herself. She said the moment she stopped trying was the moment she started actually living. I understood what she meant in a way I couldn't have articulated before. There's something that happens when you stop orienting your entire life around the question of whether certain people approve of you. The energy that used to go into that question goes somewhere else. It goes into work, into friendships, into the slow construction of a life that actually fits who you are. Willa said it differently. She said, some families are the ones you're born into and some are the ones you build. I think that's true. I think it requires a specific kind of courage to admit it. Not bravado, not anger, just the quiet willingness to look at what is real and act accordingly. What I did was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't buy that lien to punish anyone. I did it because it was the only honest response to a situation in which the word family had been used for years as a mechanism of control. I gave it a shape that I could actually live with. A shape that said, I see what this has been. I'm not pretending otherwise. And I'm not going to keep paying, financially or otherwise, for the privilege of being treated like a liability. The lake is quiet in January. The herons don't care what happened at Christmas. The water doesn't ask anything of you. I stand on that dock sometimes and think about the 17-year-old who handed over her savings at a kitchen table because she'd been told that's what family does. And I want to tell her something. Not that it gets easier, because it doesn't, not exactly, but that the life waiting on the other side of all that difficulty is genuinely hers, that she'll build it herself. piece by piece, out of discipline and honesty and the willingness to stop waiting for permission. That's the only thing worth knowing, really. The rest follows from that.